Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 6 from the 2016 World Chess Championship match between challenger Sergey Karjakin, playing on the white end, and our current champion Magnus Carlsen. 5 games in, 5 draws. Let's see what would happen in Game 6. e4 by Karjakin, Carlsen replying with e5. Another Ruy Lopez. And we follow Game 4 up until move 9. So let's see where play deviates. In Game 4, we had in reply to d3, d6. This is where play varies. We have now Carlsen trying d5. This is a gambit. Black is giving up a pawn in exchange for what exactly? Well, let's find out. E takes d, knight takes. Knight takes e. White is up a pawn. The idea is to make use of the weakened d4 square. And this will translate into black acquiring the bishop pair. This will now be a very important piece for Team Black. Knight c3, knight b4, 2 pretty invasive pieces in white's position. Pressure on both bishop and the c2 square. White gets some development in. This is an open position, a very sharp start to this Game 6. Knight takes bishop, a takes, c5, knight e4. So this is prepared to maybe kick the knight away. The c-pawn is now free. Now black takes some action against these knights in the center. First with f6, knight f3, and now f5. It's important not to go to a natural looking square, c3, in reply to f5, because the queen is now restricted. She would have 2 jobs to watch over both knight and pawn. A follow-up of bishop takes knight would be really bad for white. Not a good reply here. Best is to damage the kingside structure. You definitely don't want to do that. So the 2 key moves here would be knight e to d2 or knight e to g5. In the game, Karjakin moves forward. Knight to g5, eyeing up f6. Carlsen takes out the knight, which at first glance to me seemed a little bit odd because, is the idea to take out the knight so you no longer have to worry about knight to e6 with this fork? Because after this capture, white can simply recapture with another knight, and isn't this threat back on? Well, this is what happens in the game. Karjakin does recapture with the knight. And is this really a threat now? Not so much. Let's see why. After h6, the knight hops into e6. Is white winning material? Not so fast. Queen d5 is there, making use of that all-important light square bishop. So, it's true, black gave up a dark square bishop, gave up the bishop pair by capturing on g5, but there is still some strength in having the light square bishop on board. Who will have the better bishop? f3 parries the mate, and now rook f to e8. Is this an issue? Quite a tempting move, knight c7 would be. Is that not working? Is that what white goes for? Well, in the game it was rook to e5, but let's just have a look at this variation. Suppose the knight goes into c7. It's hitting all major pieces. How will black react? Black can capture the rook, and now play queen to d4. Keep in mind the f3 move parried the mate, but opened up this diagonal towards the king. This is a timely check that is now picking up the bishop on f4. Still, an interesting variation. Knight takes rook, knight takes c2. Hitting white with a fork. All along, this is reading in as a 0 evaluation with the following move, knight to b6. Surprising move. Knight b6 here, allowing knight takes rook. Suppose the rook moves to, I don't know, d1. There's some now tactics. Yeah, there would be a tactic on f3. They follow up fork. If the rook goes to f1, apparently queen to d6 is a best move, making it difficult for the knight to be rescued. And soon there could be knight to d4, and maybe another accident is right around the corner on the f3 square. White's pieces are not well coordinated. That's the big issue here. A clumsy f-rook, well, a clumsy white rook, a knight that's stuck in the corner, and a queen. They're not really tied in well. So that would have been a very interesting continuation, kicking off with knight c7. That is not a path we went down. White instead opts for a rook lift, throwing a punch at the queen, queen d6, maintaining pressure on the knight. c3, this now forces, there's a pretty forcing line now. The knight is hit. Rook takes knight is available, that's what happens. Rook takes rook, queen takes. Pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn. So where do we stand here? 24 moves in. We have something similar to game 5. Same pieces are on board. Opposite color bishops, each side with the rook, each side with the queen. This pawn is passed, but it's difficult to see how he would really ever get rolling because of because of black's grip over the light squares. Meaning, it's hard to imagine that this pawn even steps foot on d5. Now, concerning the kingside positions, this is really what captures my attention in an endgame position like this. And it is, whose bishop will be put to use better? Who has a better king shelter? White has a better king shelter. This f3 g2 structure does well to combat black's dark square bishop, whereas we really cannot say we can't say that much for black's king position. There isn't a pawn that's on f6, and so the g7 square is something that is potentially sensitive. You know, we can see rook a to c1, rook c7, bishop e5 ideas. There is a way to one day maybe pinpoint the g7 pawn. We can't say the same about the corresponding g2 square. It is not as accessible. So play follows with rook c1, rook c8. The rooks are exchanged. Queen e1, couple ideas. She is on an open file, so she's looking to maybe hunt down the b pawn, maybe enter with queen e5 and bishop to e5, converging on g7. For example, queen c2 might seem very active, but queen e7, bishop's hit, pawn's hit, and soon, how will you defend g7? It's important for black to not get too aggressive with the queen. She needs to take up a defensive role because of this g7 square being a bit sensitive. So queen d7 it is. King h2, white just tucks the king away, gets out of any diagonal or rank checks. a5 secures b4. Queen e3. The only weakened point in black's position is where? This is covered, this is covered, covered, covered. a5 is the only soft point. So black goes after b3. Meanwhile, white hunts down the a pawn. Bishop takes b, queen takes a. Queen takes d, queen takes b. This is quite simplified. Everything is balanced. 4 pawns each, opposite color bishops, a queen each, bishop e6. There's only 1 point to defend. It's not going to be enough to really press any further. This is a simple way to lock everything down, post up the queen on d7. Everything would be defended from that position, and there really isn't any forward progress. Both sides understand this quite well. After bishop to e6, they agree to what is now a 6th draw in a row. If you're curious, in 1995, Anand versus Kasparov, that match had 8 draws in a row. Will we break that record? Hopefully not. This was a brief game, about a 100-minute game, which, it seemed like Carlsen didn't have any issues holding for black. So they go into a rest day. It remains level. It just gets more intense as we get deeper into this match, because one wrong slip and it will be difficult to recover. You won't have very many games to recover from a loss, so we will see what happens. Game 7 is on November 20th. Let's have a look at at the tail of the tape. Not much excitement. Another pretty flawless game here by both sides. Nothing significant out of the opening, and then, as soon as c3 was in, we had a forcing sequence, and nothing to really speak of. Inaccuracies, mistakes, blunders, nothing for either side. An average centi-pawn loss of 6, so very clean game. Not the first time we've seen such a game. It's locked. 3-3. We'll see what happens in Game 7. As usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below, and I will catch you for Game 7. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.